excited to be back. It seems like just yesterday. I always think that the summer break is going to be really long, and like so many other things in life, it absolutely flew by. But we are just so excited to be back here at the beautiful Print Center at Kelvin. We have so many exciting things in store for you coming up this fall and all throughout 2026. We've got many of our favorite speakers back again, like today, along with a lot of new ones. And one of the things that I always like to emphasize is that even if we're handling subject matter or having some of the same speakers who have been back, you're never going to see the same presentation twice. It will always be approached in a slightly different manner. You'll have different questions. And what I find is that so many of the subjects that we tackle in this room are not only thought-provoking, but a lot of them can be pretty complex. And for myself, I've really come to realize that I need to hear these things many times before they start to sink in. So we feel that by hearing them multiple times from different perspectives, from different people, we hope that you will continue to, think more about them and really learn, and simply to consider this time well spent. So I am Laura Kelso, for any of you who don't know me. I'm the creator of this series and the owner of Kelso Homes Real Estate. So we help people with late in life, generally downsizing moves, from an aspect of helping with every single part of their transition as opposed to just selling their home. So it's kind of a unique service that we provide. And one of the things that I just want to say is, you'll notice the room is bigger. So we've really been growing, and I just kind of ask for grace and understanding as we continue to try and balance, your comfort with the growth of this series, because we never want to have to turn people away. It's really important to us that everyone who desires to be here will always be able to attend. And so you might see some changes in how we set up the room. We might have some chairs that just have lap boards instead of just the tables, all that type of stuff, because we really feel that that's an important thing, and we want you to keep bringing your friends. So as you can see, it takes a small army to put these on. There's a lot of moving parts, and I absolutely couldn't do it without my fabulous team, Cheri being one of them at the end, who is not a professional speaker, very nervous about today. So please be kind to her as she answers her questions. Stephanie at the main table, who has now become really the face of Savvy Seniors. She's now my right-hand person with both GR Savvy Seniors and Real Estate. So when you ask questions, often it will be her answering. And she has been a sanity saver for me, and just gives us wonderful opportunities to help grow this place. And then also, most importantly, the educational partners that you see around the room and our other volunteers. We couldn't do this without their help and their support. And keep in mind that many of these businesses are, not only helping support us financially, but they are donating their time to be here. And so we really feel that that's important, and I just hope that you can support them. They are handpicked because I believe in these companies that they will serve you well. So all of you should have a couple different handouts in front of you. The yellow handout is going to be our feedback forms. We really value your feedback. Let us know if you need anything else, if you need services, if you have questions, if you don't have a permanent name tag and would like one, all of those wonderful things. I hope all of you that desire got a notebook. Somebody hold up a notebook for me. Okay, so if any of you in the audience are not familiar with what those are, we give those out for free, and by design, all of our handouts that you get are 3-hole punched, and so we hope that you can simply build your own reference system and library from all of these presentations, and that you'll keep coming back and learning more. So that's the goal with that. So if you didn't get one today or don't have one yet, please pick one up. Of course, we're back to doing the bingo sheet. Somebody hold up a bingo sheet for me. There you go. All right, awesome. So any of you who aren't familiar with that and know what that is, we do larger drawings about every 3 months. And the goal is that we get people moving around the room out there and getting to know our wonderful educational partners and just getting some free stuff. So make sure you pick up a bingo card. You want to keep those with you. Make sure you have your name on it, and then bring it back with you each time, and don't turn it into us until it's filled. So we hope that that's good. So if you've come here a while, you know that we have a lot of experts that have been on this stage. We've had doctors and attorneys and psychologists and all kinds of community leaders. And yet, sometimes the very best experts are just everyday people who have been through a certain situation, a certain transition, and they've lived to tell about it. Right? So today, I am just so excited to have Aunt Todd. She's going to be telling her story and the story of her and her husband. And it's going to be different than what you've seen before. We're going to do it a little bit differently than we've approached things in the past with, all the different questions to each expert. And this is really going to be much more conversational, much less scripted, and 100% just true and realistic, right, Ann?
Yes, absolutely.
So I know her well enough and have gotten the privilege to know her over the last year to know that she's not going to sugarcoat things. Because I'm guessing you guys want to know the truth, right? You don't want things sugar-coated about what a downsizing move might be like. It's important that you really, really know what the truth is. So Ann and Jim Todd built a home in Ada over 50 years ago. 2 acres of beautiful woods perched high up on a hill. It's the place that they raised their 2 sons. They retired, their kids grew up, and their hobbies started to shift as their physical needs change, like we all do. So this is going to be the story of how Ann and Jim made the difficult but exciting decision to downsize from their home of 50 years and choose and move into a senior community. Now, when somebody thinks about a downsizing move, it's usually super overwhelming because they are thinking about the things that have to happen. They might be asking themselves a lot of questions like, where do I move to? Am I able to pay the down payment for a senior community or purchase a home or condo before selling my home? What am I going to bring with me? How is it going to fit into the new space? And boy, oh boy, what on earth do I do with all the extra stuff? Am I right? Those are some pretty real questions. Now, with Ann and Jim's move, not uncommonly, there was a lot of companies involved. Now, even myself, who does this every single day, did not realize until I put this presentation together all the companies that this entailed. So, as you can see, we started out with an elder law attorney so that she could get her trust documents updated, a senior living advisor who helped her tour and choose a community, a lender who helped them do a home equity line of credit, a move manager who assisted them in what they were going to bring with them and how it would best fit into their new space, movers who had the muscle to move the actual furniture, an estate sale company that helped pack up and sell the extra items they wouldn't be bringing, a realtor who helped them get their home prepped for market, which included hiring painters, contractors, well and septic inspector, septic pumping company, a well company, a survey company, a cleaning company, a snow plowing contractor, a title company, and finally a company specializing in installing new septic systems. And I wonder why I'm tired at the end of the day, right? So, now, for those of us who specialize in working with seniors every day, it's not uncommon that we have built up a network of professionals where, because our clients need a lot of different things, and certainly we can't provide all of them. So it's very normal to build up a network where, when I have somebody who has financial planning needs, I'm reaching out to Cheri. When I have somebody who has mortgage needs, I'm reaching out to Jenny, and so forth. And all of these professionals that have been so incredibly helpful, and at the end of the day are critical to these transitions. So the question then becomes, who manages and coordinates all of these people? Well, in most cases you do. If you're selling a home with, a normal realtor might coordinate a lot of these people, all of the typical selling stuff, but a lot of times when you're doing a downsizing move, you're figuring this out on your own, or you've got grown kids involved that are traveling from out of state. They might be taking a leave of absence from jobs. They're usually helping their parents or grandparents for a matter of months to coordinate all these many things. So it's, it can be a pretty complex process. So I'm just so excited that we can talk through this today and just hear from Anne, her personal account of how she felt, what she thought about, the things that went well, the days that she might have been tearing her hair out, and also have some of the professionals that were able to work directly with her through this long transition so that you can get the full picture of what that looks like. So without any further ado, I'm going to go down the line, starting with Anne, and just have each person do a quick introduction before we hop into questions.
I'm one of you. I came here just like as you are doing today, looking for some answers. I saw something in one of the local magazines and I thought, boy, that sounds interesting. I want to go there. And I did, and I met the most amazing people here. So I kept coming. And those people have helped me so much, and I'm so grateful for this group. So I'm just like you, just moving one thing to another, and here I am in a different place than I was a year ago. Here on stage. Never thought that would happen. But that's my story.
Thanks, Anne.
Good morning. I'm Cheri Hooper. Many of you already know who I am. You all visit me at the table out there, and I appreciate seeing each of you. It's so good to be back. I love this day, and I can't wait to be here to share your story.
Hey, good morning. I'm Jenny Wagner. I work with Mercantile Bank. I've worked with Laura for a long time. I've been in mortgage lending for over 30 years, so kind of know what I'm doing a little bit. In particular, with Anne, we have a really great success story from all those 17 companies. Cheri was her financial planner. I was her equity line. We did an equity line, or what's called a bridge loan. There's information at my table. And so we were able to comfortably give Anne a comfortable timeline of going from the big, beautiful home in Ada to her senior community. So I didn't have the equity line for very long. She didn't really need it, maybe 90 days. But it let them have that time to bridge that equity from the current home to the next home. And it made everything easier.
Good morning, I'm Cheri Chesner. I'm a realtor with Kelso Homes. I'm a listing partner with Laura. Been in real estate for about 8 years and joined Laura maybe 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago. And absolutely love this process that we go through. So working with Anne was just a joy, and Anne and Jim just really enjoyed that. So
There, thanks, ladies. So first off, Anne, I'm so grateful, and you are so very brave. I cannot thank you enough for your willingness to be up here and to tell your story, because I really believe that, I'm guessing all of you out here really want to hear the truth about what this was like. Am I right? All right. So let's start with a bit of history. Tell us about why you and Jim chose to build your home in that particular spot in Ada, and some of the things that you loved most about your home.
All right, well, my husband was brought up in Ada, and we had other homes in Ada, and we built on a hill overlooking the Grand and Thornapple rivers, and we both love nature, and we had it there with the animals and the leaves and the trees that we all, both of us loved. And then our kids grew up there, we were wonderfully located. The kids went on to be married and have homes of their own. And there was Jim and I, and Jim had some health problems, and he eventually couldn't do the physical work or the mental work. So I took that on, and I thought, this is good for you. You can do this. Until one day I thought, what if something happened to me? What is Jim going to do? He can't take care of me. And so we started thinking about what else is there. Excuse me. So I came here and I heard Cheri speak. And I said, that's the woman I want. She just gave me confidence that she could handle me and I could handle her, and we've become good friends. So that was my first thing, and Cheri just introduced me to many, many other people, and believe me, it was a team effort, and they are the most, I trusted the team, and they just came through for me. So is that what you want to know?
Yeah, that's a good start. So in terms of the time frame, was this something, the thought of moving from your home, that you started thinking about really over a course of months? Or was it really a course of years where it started to kind of eat away at you, like, maybe, looking into the future, this might not be the best place?
When we went through the COVID epidemic, there we sat, and we could go out and come back and forth, and I had friends who couldn't go out of their homes and I thought, we're going to stay here for the rest of our retirement. Well, things had there were different plans in the air, and that was Jim's health. And me thinking, am I going to sit up here on this hill with no neighbors and for the rest of my life? And it's time to think about plan B. What else can we do? And I would look at condos or something, and I knew, because I came from a healthcare background, that it might be important to have something nearby that was where if we needed assisted living, that we could move to. And I didn't want to be at home and have Jim halfway to Granville in a nursing home that was selected by the health committee instead of us. And I'm driving in the middle of January every day. That didn't appeal to me at all. So I started thinking about CCRCs, which is the retirement community with a continuum of care. And that's what I wanted, and especially having come from a healthcare community, having worked in that field, I knew we got old. I knew that was a step. So we had friends at different ones, and I kind of knew what they were. But Laura had someone who was on deck with showing people different homes and picking them out. And we wanted 2 bedrooms and 2 baths, and there weren't any in Grand Rapids. There was one in Rockford, but I didn't want to move to Rockford. I wanted somewhere where my physicians were, my eye doctors, and my grocery shopping, and I wanted something convenient, because I wasn't thinking for immediate help. I wanted help when I was 90 or something. What if I'm not driving? Where can I go to get help? If I sit on this hill east of Ada, who's gonna take me there? So I wanted something really convenient. And then Laura called and said, Porter Hills has a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. And if we make a decision quickly, you can have a department, and they're going to redo the whole thing, tear out the cabinets, tear out all the appliances, the rugs. You get to choose the colors. And I thought, yeah, well, I'm up for that. And before I knew it, I had said, yes, let's do it. And then everything started.
Yep, it's kind of like, okay, sit down and strap in, right? It was a pretty fast-moving process from there. So a couple of things I like to touch upon. Often when we are meeting people at the stage that Anne was initially at, it's this idea of 1 move or 2 moves. So it might be that she is, or that any of you in the audience are, in that 60s and 70s range, tired of caring for a large home that you've lived in for a lot of years, but it's super appropriate to either move to a smaller home with a different configuration or to go to a condo where you just have less work, less of the exterior maintenance, you're not dealing with the yard and things like that. But if you are maybe in your upper 70s or your 80s or starting to have any type of challenges, or even if you really desire community living. So there are a lot of very healthy people moving into continuing care retirement communities at younger ages because it's a little bit like living on a love boat. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, it's, these places are really nice. So if you've never visited them, I always just tell people, like, hey, knowledge is power. So you simply want to know what your options are and then think about that fact that, gosh, I really still want to live independently. We want to live in a condo. And then think about that idea of that's really great, but you do want to make a plan for if you then ever have to move again. And as long as you have a plan in place, that's really the most important part. So, Anne, what were some of the things that initially scared you about making this decision?
I don't know that I was really scared. I did wonder, how do people, houses were selling really fast, how do people buy something first and then sell their house? Where does that money come from? What are the steps? We hadn't moved in 50 years. I didn't know what to expect. And they graciously moved me through it step by step. Jenny told me what an equity loan was. I had heard those words, but I really didn't know the steps of it. And she made it so smooth that I could just understand all the financial things that Cheri was telling me that we could do. I had a guideline. Nancy Hillary, who is a lawyer here, Cheri introduced me to her. We just hit it off. So Nancy helped me with the legal stuff and getting my things in order for the kids because I didn't want to leave a bunch of I didn't want it unraveled for them. They were there at some of the meetings we had, and I think that gave them an idea that, okay, Mom and Dad are gonna change, they're gonna give away our house that we grew up in. And it was hard for one of my boys, but I think he accepted it after listening and hearing how it was going to happen. So it just went very smoothly. I don't remember being scared. I do remember thinking, oh my gosh, I should have downsized a long time ago.
All right, we're going to jump in with Cheri Hooper for just a second. So, Cheri, what were your thoughts when you first met with Ann and Jim, and how was their situation either different or similar to other clients that you've worked with at this stage?
Well, I met Ann first, and if you guys can't tell, she's an amazing woman. She walked into my office, and she's gorgeous, right? I looked at her, and she just has so much energy. She has so much spark. You could just see these things when you sat down and you started talking with her. And this was my, Ann and I had just met that day too. I mean, it wasn't an existing client that I had built a relationship with or grown over the years, and now we were just taking on a new challenge. And we met, and she gave me this challenge. It was just brand new. And I just remember when she came in and she was describing her situation, because it's really important for me to ask all these good questions to find out not only what was it that Ann was coming in for, but maybe what was behind some of these decisions, because that's where you can really get a sense of what's going on in her mind and where these decisions are ultimately coming from and what we might have to overcome or the challenges, just different things. And so she came in alone that first time. And I remember just thinking, as she's telling me how she's taking care of Jim, she's taking care of this large home. I think there must have been a storm recently. You were cleaning up all of these trees or branches in the yard. And I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, how is she doing all of this? That's a lot to take on, to have this home and this loved one and doing all of it. There's only so many hours in the day. And then she kept saying, I said, well, what is it that you want to do? That's the really important thing. Here you are in your retirement. She's worked in healthcare for so many years. I think it was over 30, you had told me. And so it was just time to be able to do something for her. And she wanted to travel. She enjoyed getting together coffee with friends at Forest Hills Foods. If any of you guys know that, I must have seen Ann 20 times there, and I didn't even know her yet. Because now I see her a lot too. But there was just things that she wanted to do, and she was restricted and even a little bit confined. And I still thought, well, if Jim needs her and she's out trying to shovel or mow or pick up all of these branches, how long is it going to be before Ann can't do that either? And so when she started talking about different opportunities, I just wanted to help her get there. Whatever it took, we were going to make it work. And so we kind of dug in a little bit. She brought everything that I'd asked for that day, and I had to just jump in and really learn. Like I said, I just met. So any of the assets, that she had were already into existence, had purpose. We had to repurpose them in a way to make this work. So I had to understand this asset was for what, this asset for was what, kind of understand those income streams, understand the original, and could we repurpose them? We made phone calls. We had to figure things out a little bit. I had to dig in and learn to make sure that this was gonna to be okay. So in working with Ann in the financial world, we were able to really just find out what she wanted to be able to get to, how are we gonna get there, how are we gonna use her existing income and or assets to make it doable, and then we had to convince Jim. In addition, as she mentioned, there were just different things that there were risks out there. We wanted to make sure that we were taking some of these risks and covering them, so to speak, making sure that those risks weren't going to be there so that they were protected and stable, and that when we could get her to that end point, all would be well. And she could be worry-free, she could be stress-free, she could do the things that she wanted to do, and hopefully even with Jim, because he wouldn't have to worry about Ann doing everything. They could just settle in. And so that's where we brought in Nancy Hillary. And through those meetings, I always want to be part of those meetings. I want to know that my clients are cared for. And Ann and I and Jim, and as she mentioned, her son and daughter-in-law, they all came in. And those conversations, they're not just centered around the documents. Those are kind of boring. But the conversations that came up, as she mentioned, you know, one of her sons wasn't quite on board. He wasn't there at the time. But, you know, her son that was there and her daughter-in-law, they could see what was happening, and they were in her corner. And that was really important because she needed cheerleaders. She needed people to be able to be on her side and to see what needed to be done in felt long term, but it was short term. And so those conversations, it was really nice to be able to be a part of those conversations in that family and to get through everything and to just work with Ann to make that next step.
So Ann, one of the initial steps is always sitting down with someone like you and determining this whole timeline and strategy of, are we going to sell the house first? Are we going to move you first? Are we going to live there while it's listed? Can we do this financially? What do we do with all the stuff in the interim? All these different questions. So Ann, how did that feel to you as we sat down and really developed that strategy and gave you the opportunity to help build what made sense to you as well?
Well, I embrace change, and so I was ready for change. But my husband was more reluctant. We loved where we lived. And so Laura showed us that housing actually was not as rambunctious as it had been, and we should probably make a decision fairly soon. Porter Hills also had an apartment that was relatively ready to move into, and we could either use it or lose it. And we thought about that, and we didn't have to do it right away, but the more we thought about it, and it's about this time of year a year ago that we were thinking of it. And I looked at those darn acorns all over the patio. And the leaves that had to be blown off the driveway every single day. It was a long driveway. It had to be done. And I'm thinking, well, do we do that? And we move, and how is this going to work? But it did. I had no compunction. I thought, this is going to work because I have a team in place. And I felt that. I felt that I trusted Laura, and Laura had people that she trusted, and I could trust them too. And I found with the three women up here, they became like sisters to me. Or not sisters, daughters. I sometimes forget how old I am. And I really felt their love and care and their guidance through this. And it made me feel so comfortable. And Jim finally came along too. Jim liked things the way they were. There was nothing wrong with how they were, except that things were going to change.
So we're going to skip down there to the other Cheri Chesner. And Cheri, so, we talked about the fact that our brokerage offers this really unique scope of abilities that we offer to people when they're transitioning. And tell us some of the things that when we meet with a new person that we start to talk through to help them decide what's most important to them.
Sure. So that initial consultation is really a key step. We kind of go through the big picture of everything first, and we narrow that down just to kind of really focus on goals and timeline and determine, is it best to stay in the home and list it, or move first and then have us come in and take over from that point. But some of those considerations would be health and mobility, and if it's safe to stay in the home during that time, and comfortable also, because it's not easy to pack up your stuff at the moment's notice when you have showings. Putting it in laundry baskets and throwing it in your car and leaving, so just taking those things into consideration, as some people probably have been through already. But we just address concerns and questions up front and really try and answer those questions. We take our time. The consultation does take, a few hours. We want to tour the house and find out more about what the goals are and the timeline. But also just that we can handle as little or as much as someone wants us to do and to handle through that process. So we've got a lot that we handle, but it's enjoyable.
Thanks, Cheri. So speaking as somebody who currently has her house listed and is living there, it's a joke, okay? There's a way that we live in our homes, and there is a way that it needs to look when people walk through your homes, and they are not the same. It's every morning right now our home's been on the market for about 10 days, and I'm getting up and I'm grabbing everything from our shower and squeegeeing it and wiping it down and cleaning and stuffing it away and throwing in a load of laundry and picking up every last final item in the house as if we don't live there. And I will tell you, it's exhausting. So that's part of the reason why we really, talk to people, and just for fun. So Anne was gracious enough to let me share these pictures. So in the case of her home, her and Jim loved antiques, and they had a beautiful home filled with antiques, and Jim had a library full of books, and those are all wonderful things. And when we're in our homes and we're surrounded by the things that we personally love, that's how we live. That's what brings us joy. But people have been tainted by this crazy thing called HGTV, and they think that every house is immaculate. And it's a little bit what they expect when they are browsing online. And one of the things that I like to emphasize as we're talking to people about selling their homes is the way people shop these days. It's different. This is how they shop. They're shopping online. They're on Zillow, they're on Redfin, they're on Realtor.com and Homes.com. And statistics show us that we have between 2 and 8 seconds to catch the eyes of a buyer. And if you miss that, they do one of these, and then they're not even looking at your home. So if it looks dark, if it looks crowded, if it looks like it might need a lot of updates, just basic things like, taking down wallpaper and painting. So you will notice that these are the same spaces. So the picture above and the picture below are the same exact room, just maybe from a slightly different angle. And so some of the things that we talked about and did in Anne's house were pretty typical things. She had some rooms with wallpaper. We took down all the wallpaper. We gave everything a fresh paint job because it had been a number of years since some of the areas had been painted, which just helps to do it fresh and clean. And then we, took out her items and came back with fake staged items. So it's a little bit crazy and a little bit like Disneyland, but it does make a difference as people look at those pictures online. So Anne, like most of the people who have lived in a home a long time, you had a large amount of equity built up in that home that helped make all of this possible. So tell us, you alluded to, hey, you'd heard of the term of a bridge loan or a home equity line of credit, but, you didn't really know much about it, right? So how did that feel when Jenny was able to explain how that worked and that this could be a financial tool?
Well, yes, and that was the one question I had. I didn't know how all this was going to work together. Jenny was wonderful in explaining it, and explaining it to me in terms that I could understand, and that she was going to take care of it, and I trusted her because Laura trusted her. It went very smoothly. What didn't go so smoothly was the fact that we had a house full of primitive antiques. And we had so much fun getting them as we were growing up in our early years. And Jim had so many books and music, and he wanted to take it all. And he thought it would be just fine if we could put it all together, and if there was a room, there was a big storeroom that we could put it in. We're downsizing. Downsizing meaning we're not going to take everything with us. Laura had another team member who isn't here today, and that was a mover, Moving Angels. Lisa came in and sort of organized me, and what she did was to get a graph. She measured every inch of the apartment at Porter Hills. I'm talking about Porter Hills because that's my story. And I know you have different ways and different wants and needs and so forth. But I can tell you this is a great idea. She measured it, she put it out on a graph, so we had exact measurements of the apartment. And then she measured our furniture and what would fit in there and what wouldn't. And Jim slowly began to understand that we can't take everything with us. So we put it all out on a graph, and what were we going to do with the rest of it? What we did was we kind of marked the furniture that we wanted and the furniture that we didn't want. And it wasn't only furniture, of course. If you have antiques, you just bask in all the little thing that you have to have. So we had what turned out to be a lot of junk. So, but there was another mover who did estate sales and auctions. Now, we realized we couldn't have an estate sale where we were. The driveway was too narrow, it was too high, it was too steep, there wasn't enough parking. And so we decided, let's take this all to auction. That woman came in and took what we had left. So by this time I had moved. I want to tell you that story about moving. Can I take a nap?
Yeah.
Let's go back to Moving Angels, who was moving all of our stuff to Porter Hills. And she said, don't worry about it. I want you to take 2 days off and go and do something fun. And I thought, well, I want to be there when you're moving in. I gotta be in charge here. And she said, no, we'll take care of it. And I thought, she will take care of it. She will. We came back from that 2-day, it was evening. I opened the door to the apartment, and what do I see? A little jack-o'-lantern all lit up, smiling at me, and I thought, she found our Halloween things, and it was such a welcoming thing. Just something little like that made me feel like, oh, it's done. She had put things in my closet, color coordinated. All the shoes were put away. In the kitchen, she had taken pictures of how I had my kitchen, and she put all the kitchen things away. I have now changed it to this day. It's a perfect place. The furniture was in the right place. All the decor was in the right place. The other thing we had was a bunch of art, and that I asked her to leave because I wanted to see it and place it and what we were going to use and not use. But coming into that apartment and not having to do anything, people ask me, are you getting settled in yet? I go, oh, I was settled in when I walked in the door. So the other part of our belongings went to auction, and that's still going on. And she has an auction every so often, and I'll get a check or something. And but more than that, she cleaned everything out. It was ready for Cheri and her crew to come in and get it clean and wash the windows and do the carpeting and the painting. I hardly had anything to do with it. I just kind of went along and said, oh yeah, that looks great, that's great. Did
And
I
I'm-
answer your question?
No, you're doing great. And because all of us have crawl spaces that look like that, right? Absolutely. No, it really does take a village, as any house is prepped for sale and to be ready. And so we were just so incredibly grateful that Anne trusted us to essentially do those things for her, and trusted Lisa, because that's hard. That's such a challenging thing, to be able to give up that control. Now, Lisa of Moving Angels, she happens to be in Ireland at the moment, and that's the reason that my husband and I aren't moving until next week, because she will be doing our move, because I would not move without her. She just does a great job, and it's always that idea of moving is exhausting mentally for anyone. When you're a seller and you're making all those decisions and you're going through what's called decision fatigue, we don't want you to also then be burdened with the physical things and the actual putting away. And so the more that we can, either our team or the people that we help set people up with, or even for that matter, if you're using family and friends. Now, please understand that when we're up here and we're talking about our team, if you've got a team in place already, that's awesome. We have a lot of clients that we work with that say, gosh, I've got 3 strong boys that they're going to do our moving, and my daughter-in-law loves to pack, and my other daughter-in-law just lives to clean windows. So, all that stuff's great. So it doesn't, we don't have to do those things, but it's just important that you have a team in place so that you're not trying to do everything, because it's going to end up being more than you think, and that's the important thing. So I'm going to jump back to Jenny for just a second, because the ability for Anne to do that closing at the continuing care retirement community is pretty important, because what you may not realize is that often if you choose a CCRC, or for that matter, you're even moving to a condo, you're having a closing where you are giving them a large check. And it's just like a closing, on a house. And so we really had to be able to make sure that we could free up that money so that she could write this check prior to her house being sold. So, Jenny, if your role at Merck is very much revolving now around education, and tell us how critical it is for people to understand the various financial tools that are available to them, and just really the idea of having a lender that they can trust, who is not trying to just sell to them. Somebody who's really going to talk about what are the best options particular to a client.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. So I think what's different for me just in general as a person is I have a degree in social work. So I ended up in mortgage 30 years ago. I don't know how that happened. But definitely my roots are caring about people. So am I a loan officer? Yes. Am I lumped into the group of people who like to sell? Yes, I am. But that's not me. Laura and I's children grew up together. Her son slept at my house all the time, vice versa. So that's our connection. So this panel, we truly care about what we do. We happen to be mortgage, we happen to be financial planner, we happen to be realtor. But I have a mother who's still her age as this audience, and all this stuff is really important. So common, just like Anne said, people don't know what they can do with their equity, right? Like, I have a house that's worth $500,000, but what does that do for me? How do I get to my next step? Because Anne had to write a big check. And lots of us, especially 50 years in your home, a lot of us own our homes free and clear or have a really substantial amount of equity. So the way that a bridge loan works, it's why Laura, a lot of why Laura needs me, whether it's a refinance or, of course, Laura and I do a lot of purchase together, that equity is available. So the way that a bridge loan works, I'm going to use the example of a $500,000 house. Believe it or not, that's kind of an average sales price these days. If you own that property in free and clear, we can definitely tap into that equity and get you that bridge loan. We can bridge that equity you own into the next home. I don't care if it's a retirement community or a condo or a new little single family residence, you can bridge that equity. So specifically for Ann's case, and I'm guessing you all may have similar situations, Cheri and I worked really well together. So Cheri had this new client, Ann has X number of dollars. Cheri and I do math all day. Numbers, the boring part. So Cheri's, how can I get her the cheapest money to borrow temporarily? In other words, pay the least amount of penalty on, right? How could she tax shelter that money? How much could Cheri give her? And then how much can Jenny give her? And how can we get it to them the cheapest way? Because mortgages are expensive. You know, penalties on our precious money are expensive. So her and I worked really hard together to get her as much as we could. So we were able to, between an equity line and cashing out part of her retirement or investments, we got her the ability to write that check, and it happened pretty darn quick. And Ann did exactly what I told her to do, and that was important so that we could close that equity line in 3 or 4 weeks. They typically take 3 to 4 weeks to close. So once you make that, you flip that switch and make that decision, we put the equity line in place. Maybe you're working with a financial planner as well. And it really is just like buying a home. It's step one. What do I qualify for? And you have to qualify. Lots of us are on fixed income. It's not a lot of money, and you know that, right? So what other sort income streams do you have, and do you qualify? Because if you don't, you do have to potentially live there while the house is being listed, with the contractors, with the septic being pumped, and it's not near as comfortable as what Ann experienced. So I love that I'm able to be part of that, and it means something way more than a mortgage to me. We went and had lunch at her house. We celebrated her apartment. Her apartment is gorgeous. I can't wait to live like that. I love that apartment, and it was just it's absolutely beautiful. Her taste, she has elegant, beautiful taste. Some of her collections are beautiful, and it was special. We had lunch on Sunday afternoon and celebrated what Susie's organization had done, and we all appreciated that beautiful, organized kitchen and went home to our messy ones. But just having a really easy process has been.
We don't talk about that tonight.
Yours is clean now, Laura, but it wasn't for 20 years. I've seen her kitchen with young boys running around. Ooh. But just being part of it has been great. So and there's all different kinds of equity lines. There's fixed equity lines. There's equity lines of credit. For this particular situation, it truly is called a bridge loan, and I'm happy to talk about that with anybody.
Awesome, that's great. And one of the things I haven't mentioned yet that we are going to be starting to do this year is some specialized breakout sessions with our educational partners. Now, these are going to be events that are scheduled at a different time from the series. They're going to be hosted at a location chosen by the educational partners and still free, and you'll have to sign up, and we anticipate this being maybe a group of, 10 to 20 people versus the, 100 plus, where you can listen to somebody like Jenny dig into the details of lending and bridge loans and things like that, or insurance, or, some of these specialized things that these guys do that are more than what we can talk about in the course of these types of presentations. So just kind of watch for those as time goes on. And so while we were getting all these things in place and working on transitioning her to her new place, then it was time for our real estate team to be jumping in on the items that we could do at her home even before it was listed. So Cheri, the other Cheri, go ahead and jump in on some of the things that we started to schedule at Ann's home and how that went.
Sure. So, just like my home that I live in, we've been in it for 20 years, so it definitely needs refreshing. So don't come to my home right now. But being in your home for 50 years, it's going to need some refreshing. So we did new light fixtures. We did some wallpaper removal. I think Laura mentioned some of that already. We did fresh paint throughout. Some of the property and mechanical issues would be the well and septic inspections, so we made sure that all that was done. Property survey. There was an oil tank that was empty and unusable, and so we had to have that filled with sand and take care of that. And then, some of the things with the well and septic, took a little bit longer for us. So, and a lot of things that we do, and we try and tailor all of that for each client differently. But we sometimes are jumping in and doing some of these things. I've got stuff in my trunk right now that needs to go to a donation site from a house that we're just at. So we'll be doing that. But we don't do the septic though, do we? We don't clean the septic.
Yeah.
We'll leave that for the experts. That's kind of basically, there's a lot of things that go into this, but we definitely have a big list of things that we do to help prepare a home.
Yeah, and one of the things that we really talk about is just this idea of what are the things that you can do proactively long before you would sell a home, and even things like periodic home inspections. I mean, home repair services will do free home inspections. A lot of times before we list a property, we will talk with our sellers if it makes sense to do a pre-home inspection just to see some of the things that might be there that we don't know about, and we'll touch on that a little bit more later. But even if you're not selling in the near future, there are things that you can do so that your home would be at a place closer to ready to list. And maybe you never sell, and that's okay too. But this way, if for some reason you had to and you hadn't been planning on it, assuming you've taken care of all your deferred maintenance and your roof is in good condition and your mechanicals are in good condition and you don't have any leaks or foundational issues or things like that, that can be really helpful if something changes in your life and you determine that, it really is going to make sense for us to move. Things are mostly ready to go. So in addition to the move, and you mentioned Jim was definitely experiencing some health challenges, and this is really common among so many of the people that we work with. So how did that affect how you felt about everything? And were there times where you really felt like this whole transition was more than you could handle, or did it really help solidify why you were moving in the first place?
Oh, it helped solidify. Believe me, I feel like I was one of the luckiest people there was. I had this team that were helping me through it. It was a big move. It was more emotional for Jim than for me. But once we convinced him that he could take most of his stuff that he wanted, and he hasn't even looked at it yet. But it's there. If he wants, it's there. So I'm sorry, I forgot what you asked me. You said,
just if there were times where it really felt overwhelming. If there were ever times you felt like you couldn't do it.
No, I felt like I could do it. I felt like I was in good hands, and if I had questions, there were answers, there was help, there was support, emotional, financial, physical support from this team that I had. So no, I felt very comfortable all the way through.
You didn't lay in bed thinking, that darn Laura Kelso, what she convinced me of.
There was one time.
Okay, we won't talk about that anymore.
I'll talk about it. We had kept up the house pretty well, we thought. And there was a new roof, there was a new driveway, everything was new, air conditioning, whatever. Furnace was in good, everything was in good shape. We were ready to go. The inspector said, we think he should put in a new septic tank. No. A septic tank, who sees that? Who cares about that? And so they said, well, we'll see. And we had another inspector who did septic tanks specifically say, yeah, I think you need to do that. Oh, geez. We had moved by this time. That was off my shoulder. I did not want to handle the septic tank. But Laura was there, and she said, you know, we can do this. This would work. And I thought it was if someone bought the house, maybe a young couple or a couple with a family, they're not going to want to handle that when they get there. So the inspection did suggest that we do the septic tank, and we did. That decision was made in January, and they did the septic tank in, I think, March it was, when the ground was not frozen. It was a big disappointment to have to put that kind of money into a house that I wasn't even living in anymore. And who knew who was over there? But we did it. It was off my shoulders. I didn't have to think about it anymore. It wasn't hanging there of what if it comes in. It had to be done. And we did it.
Yeah. So there are days in real estate that I will tell you I feel like my job is just being the bearer of bad news. There are some really hard days, I'll be honest with you. So we do talk to every client about this idea of concentrating on the things that we have control over, which is how we prepare the house, how we price it, our team, how we market it, all the things that we have control over. Even in Ann's case, so we had listed in late November during a very just charged political time. People were not looking at houses. So unfortunately, the timing was really not great timing for listing, and yet I've always emphasized the fact that no different than trying to time the stock market, so to speak. If you're ready to move, you're ready to move. You really can't time the market. We have to go back to, there is a series of best practices that, you know, whatever realtor you work with should be suggesting to you so that you get the best chance of selling as quickly as you can at the very best price on your time frame, regardless of when you list. And in the case of Ann's house, it took about two months to get an offer that was decent. It came in on New Year's Eve. I had 2 listings that had been sitting on the market for about the same amount of time, and literally I got both offers on New Year's Eve. So as we were gathered with about 30 friends, I was sitting there on my phone and my computer trying to negotiate these offers, which is, you know, can kind of be part of the job. But yeah, during the last 12 months, we've had homes that have had mold, mice, termites, bees, snakes, floods, just to name a few. So anybody who lives in a house knows that, you know, stuff happens. And a thing like a septic system that your home will be inspected by somebody, and sometimes multiple somebodies when you choose to sell it, and things, you know, there's a useful life of things like those mechanicals and including the septic system. A typical life of a septic system is about 40 or 50 years. So I've had multiple clients that have needed to replace them when they moved. Now, so you might say, well, I am never doing that after hearing that story. I'm just not moving. At some point, whether you are still living or whether you are not, that house will be sold. And somebody's going to have to deal with that. And it's not any easier for your children or whoever is handling your estate to take care of replacing a septic system than if you're doing that now. So just kind of keep that in mind. Some of those things are simply unavoidable things that go along with selling a house that you just have to, you know, realize that, yeah, it's not fun, but we just got to handle it because that's what it's going to take to get to the next step. So that Ann was a trooper. We definitely had some late night talks where I just had to say we got to stay the course, you know, and it, you know, it's not always easy, but it was what it took. So, and one of the most and probably the biggest question I have for you, was it worth it?
Well, yes, of course it was worth it. I am so happy where I am. I have met new people who I love. Some of them are right here today with me. I am thriving there, and so is Jim. His health is at a standstill now. It's not going down, it's not going, it's just there. He's enjoying it. He is comfortable there. I am more than comfortable there. I am so doing all kinds of things that I can do. So yes, it was absolutely worth it.
So if you were to speak to this audience and say, is there anything that you wish you would have known before you went through this process that you'd like to tell these guys? Is there anything that would have made you feel more prepared prior to doing it? What would you have wanted to know when you were sitting on that side of the fence?
I feel that I probably should have looked into it earlier, or had a plan in place earlier. I think I moved just in time, but if I had had a plan earlier, I wouldn't have been wondering around what am I going to do. I would have had something that I know is in my future as being on a list of some place where I could move to. And I think if you move when you're a little bit younger, that you get to know people as a couple, and that makes it more fun. I've had a lot of people move in to Port Hills after I had moved, and all of a sudden one of them dies right as they're moving in. It's ironic, but get to that place and enjoy life together in a new place. It's been wonderful for us, and that would be the big thing. The other thing would be, as far as the plan, I've got a team here. You may have your own team, but someone to help you through it, some professionals to help you through it. That was so important to me. It's been wonderful.
All right, you guys, that's it. So give these guys a round of applause, please. I am sure you all have some questions. So before we do our drawings, we're going to go ahead and we're going to open it up for questions. Okay, right over there.
Sure, maybe this is for Jenny. Yeah, so how long were you planning on this bridge loan to survive for? Like beginning to end?
Oh, that's a great question.
With the full-blown moving out first
Sure.
and then staging everything.
Yeah, so from like closing day in my office, checks in her hand, to the house is sold, that timeline?
Yeah.
Okay, so equity lines in general take about a month to close, 3 to 4 weeks. So you would make an appointment with your lender and you get your equity line. Now the money's literally in the bank. You can write the check, which Ann did. She wrote the check. The house did, because of the septic issues, the house did take a little bit longer to sell than she thought. So Ann, correct me if I'm wrong, did you make 2 payments or 1? Yeah. Maybe 3?
Well, 2, yeah.
Okay, all right, so here's the timeline. I'm gonna use, let's start in November, okay? So she closed with me in November, the money was available, she closed on the condo. Took longer to sell than they thought. Fast forward to March, she's got, a septic going in. The way an equity line works, if I close on an equity line, say November 15, you're gonna have a payment not until beginning of January. So that bought her about 6 weeks. So she might probably made a January, February, and March payment. That was probably a little nerve-wracking, right, Ann? Those were not small payments. The way that a general equity line works is it's an interest-only payment. As an example, if you have a $300,000 equity line bought you into your retirement community, that payment's going to be roughly $1,800 in interest only. We don't like paying interest, do we? But what is the relevance of $1,800 a month in interest 3 months in a row when Ann was sitting on an unbelievable amount of equity? What does interest rate mean to any of us if we have all of this equity in our homes? It really, people get so wrapped up with interest rates when we gotta move and we gotta move. We can't dictate who's in office, we can't dictate rates. And life dictates what we need. So yeah, Ann had to shell out some money of Sherry's money that we weren't planning on. But in the long run, it didn't matter. It didn't matter at all. So that was about, November, December, January, February, yeah, about 5 months that she had that equity line. And then she just popped in the bank and closed it, and it was gone. Once she had the proceeds from her sale, it was paid off.
She had to pay Porter Hills at the same time.
Oh, yeah, yes. So she was paying, she bought her buy-in, right? Oh, I'm sorry. So Ann was paying her equity line, and she was paying her monthly rent at Porter Hills. So I'm sure that wouldn't have felt good if she had to do that for a year, but in her time, it doesn't necessarily take that long, but that's what hers took.
Okay.
Great question, timeline,
Okay.
yes.
Right here.
Little follow-up with what Jenny was talking about. What's the maximum a bridge loan can be? How do you know how to estimate that long plan? Like, how long is it going to take for the house to sell?
Sure.
While I'm out of it, and let the house get prepped.
Yes, and another great question, and that's a good question for anybody who's looking to do a dual transaction, right? So my first time home buyers walk in, they never had a mortgage and they think it's really tough. No. Wait until you have to sell and buy at the same time, or downsize, whatever your second situation is. That's always a slippery slope. And the words that Laura uses, can I write a contingent or non-contingent offer? Say that you were buying a house, and with this competitive market that we have had, people don't want contingent offers. In other words, I can't buy this unless this sells. So the way, you can have an equity line, a general equity line, bridge loan or otherwise. It basically is it's a 30-year amortization, so we can keep that interest payment as low as possible. So the first 10 years, it's interest only. Say that you had it for 10 whole years, and you still had a balance at the end of 10 years, it would naturally go into what's called an amortizing loan. And you have 15 years where you make actual payments and it would pay off. That's really not what you guys are looking for at this stage of life. So you say that since November, I take out my equity loan. I know I'm not listing till spring. Just let it sit there. You don't have to use it. You don't have to pull from that balance. It can just sit there. I've had equity lines on my houses. I just want them there for peace of mind. I don't use them, right? So you get that equity line in November, May, Laura gets your house prepped, it's painted, everything's looking spiffy, the tulips are out, and then you're like, okay, I got my buy-in. You come into the bank and you write your check for your equity line. It's sitting there waiting for you. You can have that equity line for 30 years if you want it. Or, like in Ann's case, she needed it for 5 months. We closed on it, she closed on her house, and she closed it out. So you can have it for indefinitely if you want it. There's a second part to that. I'm going to use an example. My house is worth $500,000. How much can I borrow, Jenny? Let's assume it's owned free and clear, okay? Which a lot of us, lucky, blessing, a lot of us own our homes. Typically, up to 60% of the value of that loan is what equity lines are. We can go up to 80. So if I don't have my calculator, but 80% of 500,000 is what you can, that's the maximum you can borrow, so whatever, 400-ish. Ann didn't need that much. But ideally, you use 60% or less of that value. I think, Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, there's some of the buy-ins in the communities anywhere between 250 to 450, 250,000 to 450,000.
It absolutely depends on the community. We see communities, some of the very, very high-end communities that can have a buy-in all the way up to $1 million. That's very, very high-end. But yeah, anywhere between a 200 to 400 is pretty typical. And it's just like buying a house in terms of based on the square footage and the number of bedrooms and bathrooms and is it a community that gives you a full garage? Is it a detached, unit, or is it one of the apartments? So, I mean, there are so many variables in that, and that is so much part of the reason to start exploring community options now. And like Todd with assisted living locators, that's a perfect opportunity to start learning about what those options are, because you can move into some of these detached units that are just like very similar to a home at a pretty young age and feel like you're still living in a condo or a home. Even if you're not feeling like, hey, maybe some of these areas are a little more designed for people who need more assistance or whatnot. But by getting familiar with those now, it makes a big difference to understand, gosh, I really like this community, and the buy-in might be $300,000 or maybe $400,000, and knowing that now, even before you make, long before you might want to have that decision, but having an idea of it, just like what Ann said about making a future plan, even if you're not ready to move on
And having that equity line just sit there, you're not gonna pay any interest on it if you don't draw on it. So it really can be one of your very preliminary steps. Let it sit there for a year, so what? But knowing that you're approved is huge, right? Oh, I love that when it's 300, but you don't know if you're approved for an equity line. If you're making $1,400 a month on Social Security and that's it, you probably don't qualify. So what do you need to qualify? What minimum investment or what RMDs? How much RMD do I need to increase to qualify? So those are some very preliminary steps. We get used to living on lower incomes as we get older, right? We don't want all the junk anymore. But that doesn't mean you're going to qualify for a mortgage. With interest rates where they are, people are qualifying less and less. So knowing if you qualify would be hugely important.
One of the other things, and Cheri brought this up, when you're looking at continuing care retirement communities and they've got these large, seemingly large buy-ins, what you have to realize too is that they have different structures where if you move, and you can still move out of those communities at any time, you will get a portion of that buy-in back. And part of the buy-in amount is determined by, do you want to get a 50% of that back someday if you move? Do you want to get 90% of that back when you move? And those are questions that are really based on, based on your age, your health, how long you think you're going to live there, and things that you should be discussing with a financial manager along with your kids, because it really makes a big difference, and it's very personal to each person's situation of what type of structure you choose to buy into.
Can I ask a question, Laura?
Mm-hmm.
Ann, are you going to be moving anytime soon?
Absolutely not.
This is for Jenny, and I was wondering, you said if we get the bridge loan and you get it started, is there a fee for that even though you never use it? And now I sold my house, the guy brought cash, and you don't use it, and you guys are still doing the paperwork, you're not even done, there's got to be some fee. Nobody works for free,
Yes.
except us folks.
Yes, that's right. Yes, it costs money. Mortgages are never cheap. I don't care if it's an equity line or a giant jumbo purchase. Mortgages are expensive. So all of the banks and credit unions locally, they offer equity lines, and we do them a little bit different. The way an equity line works is similar. I don't care what your financial institution is. But how we collect fees or don't collect fees, how we advertise, how we run specials, it's marketing, right? That's what we do as banks. Mercantile, I've worked at other banks, I've worked at credit unions, I've worked at banks. There are costs associated with an equity line. It is a mortgage. It's got a different line. It's a HELOC. It's an equity line. It's a fixed second. It is a mortgage. And Ann will attest, it's just the same process as getting a mortgage. It's not any easier because it happens to be an equity line. So I'm going to ask you for every document you can think of. But we have to pay third parties. Sometimes you have to have an appraisal. That depends on how much you borrow. We have to have a flood certification fee. I have to pull a credit report. We just pull one agency. So there's a tax service fee. We have potentially a small title policy or a quick title search. So there is third-party costs. My equity lines, and it's all about how much you borrow. If you have a $500,000 property and you only borrow $250,000, that's called a 50% loan to value. They're cheap. They're real cheap. They're $200. If you need to borrow that full 80% of that $500 because you bought a really gorgeous retirement community, that could be, now I need a full-on appraisal, now I need a full title policy. So that could cost, my equity lines cost anywhere between $200 and absolute max like $2,000. And the reason it would cost $2,000 is because I need a full appraisal, and guess what? You own the appraisal. You bought a $500 appraisal and a full title policy. So some of the banks will advertise for free. A lot of local credit unions, I won't name names, some of the bigger ones, they say free, free, free. All they're doing is wrapping those costs into the HELOC, and when you go to pay it, they're going to collect them. So you want to pay them up front or not? They're not free. And if they're advertising as free, it's probably just advertising.
I just wanted to make a quick little note about continuum of care entrance fees. Okay, so Laura made the good point that when you go, you can decide what type of residence you want, and some will have an entrance fee that's $200,000 or $150,000 or $400,000. When you pick that and you apply, they're going to look at your assets. And your assets have to be 2 times that between 2 to 4 times the amount of that entrance fee. So if it's a $200,000 entrance fee, you need to have assets of $400,000, $600,000, or even $800,000 for you to be approved for that entrance fee. So the pre-planning or looking at those things at the front end will let you know whether or not a continuum of care scenario is viable for you.
That is such a good point, and while this is not a talk on senior living, some of the other things too is when you think about that concept of moving into independent senior living, you have to qualify physically also that you are truly independent, and so that's just something else to think about, because sometimes we do find, like Ann was saying, people wait so long and then they move in and then they pass, which is so unfortunate, because many of these communities, when you're buying into some of these nicer communities, you're really paying for the amenities. You're paying for both the combination of the guarantee of care and that, peace of mind, but you're also paying for the idea that it's a wonderful place to live, just like a really nice, home or condo. You have a pool, you have exercise classes, you have, a beauty shop on site, you have all these wonderful things. You want to make sure that you are healthy enough to be able to partake in those things to really make it worth it, as opposed to waiting until you can squeak by that physical qualification and then just maybe have a nice room, but not have the opportunity or the desire at that point to really partake in all the other great aspects of the community. So I think that's an important thing to think about. Back there.
Yes, this is for Cheri Cooper. If you should be so fortunate as to have sufficient funds for a buy-in from your IRA and Roth IRA, how do you choose between those two for using the for the buy-in, or also instead possibly getting a bridge loan or part of a bridge loan, using both the IRA and the bridge loan?
That's a great question, because we have to look at everybody individually. Everybody is going to have different assets, and that's part of the process that Ann and I had to work through. Like I said, we had just met and we already wanted to make sure that we were accomplishing this big goal. So I had to kind of dig in and ask her, what assets do you have, the different types that you're talking about? Do you have Roth assets and IRAs or annuities? Do you have cash at home? Do you have cash in the bank? You're going to try to make the best decision that you can with the assets that you have. So there's other things that we have to consider based on age, because with Medicare there can be penalties if we show too much income. And so if you take out money out of the IRAs, you're going to put yourself into this higher tier on Medicare Part B. And we had to examine that. We had to consider that, because that's no fun to go up to a higher level and pay Tier 2 and do that for 2 years. So we had to really look at what other types of things were available, and we had to protect the IRA so we didn't show the additional income. So we had to use other assets that would be tax-free, as an example, and would not report in the same way. So the bridge loan comes in and helps in that way as well. So we had to do a little bit of a combination with what was available at the time. If you know that you're going to do something similar and you're choosing a plan earlier, you can start to change your assets as needed. You can do Roth conversions. You can make some of those monies available for this type of a plan. So the more planning that you have, I think the better, because taxes are always a consideration. Now again, required minimum distributions, if you haven't taken those, then you have to do that. You can use those dollars towards the purchase that we're looking for. So you have to look at what you have available, look what's needed to be done for requirement purposes for IRAs or for taxes, but you want to avoid as much as you can as well. And so we have to really lay it all out and examine what's going to be best. And generally, as you're filtering down, the answer's right in front of you, but you have to know all of these different aspects. You have to know the penalties, you have to know dates, you have to know what's required in certain areas. But that's a really great question, and unfortunately it's not really an easy one. I couldn't give you a straight answer. I can give you all of this, generalization to help get us there.
If part or all of the buy-in is considered a healthcare cost, how does that impact taxes?
Is it a healthcare cost?
I don't, the buy-in isn't, the buy-in's not a healthcare cost.
My financial advisor told me it was. Or part of it is, and the Porter Hills or wherever can tell you which portion or how much of it is considered a healthcare cost.
Well, Tom's giving me the thumbs down. I've never, I haven't had that work. I haven't seen that either. It'd be interesting to see if, can Porter Hills divide the invoicing?
Well, so essentially, there's two parts to it, okay? One is the refundable part, and the other part is the part that is spent down. And the proportions can vary, as Laura said. So let's just deal with a 50-50 scenario. The one part that they are spending down at the rate of 1.5% per month for, I think it's 62 months, that portion may have a taxable component to it. I will do the research, find your name, and I'll get that out to you. But the other portion does not, because these dwellings in the independent living are just fair housing. Okay, they're not home for aged or any healthcare component. It's basically a lease kind of scenario. Okay, but I will get the information for you.
And I think that also just speaks to this idea of building your own personal team of professionals that would always include a financial advisor, a tax advisor, which is not always the same, an attorney, and then, a lender and a realtor and a couple others that I just always say, it doesn't mean that you're moving or selling or any of those things, but you should have those people in your back pocket so that you can ask those questions. And one of the things that I've been so fortunate to build over the years is this idea that when Mark and I are making financial decisions or legal decisions, we're on a Zoom or an email chain that contains our attorney, our tax person, our, Cheri is our advisor. And so they are often throwing out, one of them will say, well, what about this? And then one of the other ones will chime in, oh, they can't do that because this will negatively affect such and such, because they all have their various areas of expertise. So I think it's super important to have people in those different areas that are going to look at the various aspects and say, oh, well, this is going to, the tax implications of that are this, or the legal implications of what you want to do is negative, and kind of, push those back and forth until you come to the best, the best options. So we have time for one more question.
I'm going to add on to that really quick too, is even when you have your tribe, so to speak, they need to talk to each other. You can't be in a silo, because if you're just getting individual information from just one of them, but you're not including each other. I know you guys always do your best to relay information to us, but it's never quite the right lingo, or it's never quite the right scenario. And so if I can talk to the CPA, or if I can talk to the other people myself, we can get to the bottom of it. We can really come up with the right information. So you need your people to talk to each other. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Very, very important. Okay.
Okay, the simple answer is that there is a portion of that part that I talked about that the community can say is going towards a future medical expense. So each community will have to give you a report of how much of those dollars are for future medical expenses, a percentage, and then with that letter you can use that as a tax deduction.
Great. All right, so a couple reminders. Yellow sheets. Please make sure you turn those in. If you need a binder, if you need a name tag, all of those good things, let us know on the way out. We're excited next month to bring you the Antiques Roadshow. So we're still figuring out the exact details of how this is going to work, but Stephanie has forms. So for anyone who desires to potentially come up here on stage with an item, she's going to have forms that you can take and fill out today and get back to us. there will only be about 5 or so items that will actually make it up on stage, and we want to make sure that there's nothing that is, of such critical value that it could get broken, or family heirlooms or any of that. We don't want to be the negative end to a family heirloom. But we're super excited because we think it's going to be a very, very fun event next month. Do you have anything to add before or you're just going to run tickets for me?
There's going to be a spot, they can do it online or the paper form through the mail.
Okay, so we're also going to send out a link to do this online.